Zach, we met you earlier, but why don't you give the audience a quick reminder about you and what Unbounded Capital does?
Of course. Unbounded Capital invests in scalable blockchains and the companies that use the technology to have transformational impact. So as a result, today we're focused on the BSV ecosystem. And today we've funded 9 companies that are using BSV in a variety of different ways. And we continue to look for kind of entrepreneurs to support along the journey of building tremendous value.
And you also have an actual digital asset fund as well, is that correct?
Yeah, we have that. So our main fund, most of our investment exposure is into these early stage companies, but we also have exposure to BSV, the asset and derivatives of BSV that we've created to give our investors exposure to our long-term thesis, which we feel isn't today best expressed without having some exposure to that asset itself. And then we have 2 kind of smaller pure hedge funds that have exposure to BSV itself and derivatives of BSV that are close to investors today.
Okay, Paul, tell us about you and the Ayre Group.
Well, I will, but I first want to also thank you. You made it, you guys stuck around, and I feel like you should be rewarded for that, but instead, I'm going to sing you a song. But
oh, God.
It's going to be painful, but it'll be quick, like a COVID test, okay? We had to save the best for last. Remember that song?
You are no Vanessa Williams.
I am
Please
not.
Sit down.
I am not.
You are no Vanessa Williams. No.
Thank you for bearing with me on that.
She was taller and much prettier.
She was. She was.
Still is.
So yes, my name is Paul Rajchgod. I'm the managing director of venture investments at Ayre Ventures, which is part of Calvin Ayre's Ayre Group. In my prior life, I was a tech investment banker in Canada and a little bit in the US, working with growth stage companies, which I would define as sub $1 billion valuations. So if you look me up, and please don't waste your time, but if you look me up on the internet and look at what prospectuses did I sign for IPOs and things like that, you're not going to see a multi-billion-dollar, Shopify or whatever type transaction. I was never at the bulge bracket firms. I worked on the smaller deals that grew and grew and grew. And as you probably know, companies go public in an IPO, but then they often continue to raise capital to acquire other companies and use their stock as a currency. So we would help those kinds of companies grow. And then the big boys would come along and elbow us out of the way and go, thanks very much, and they're at the bottom of the syndicate. Now that this is a multi-billion-dollar company and moving to NASDAQ, we'd be like, okay, well.
So tell the audience a little bit more for those of them who don't know. Sure. Who's Calvin Ayre and what is his relationship to this whole BSV world?
Sure, well, I'll do my best. So Calvin Ayre is, I would say, a well-known philanthropist and entrepreneur who I think his most well-known success was starting and building Bodog, one of the first online gaming companies and online poker and sports betting and so on. But I believe many years ago he became quite familiar with Bitcoin and then had what I believe is a pivotal role. Maybe pivotal is a strong word, but I think it's a fair word. A pivotal role in kind of the rescue of Bitcoin from what we all know. BTC has become, and first the creation of Bitcoin Cash, and then BSV as we know it today. So he's, somebody said to me today, so all his investments are BSV, and I said, well, I don't think so. Let's be clear. The piece I'm involved in is probably one little sliver of his, I would imagine, multi-billion-dollar empire, and I'm sure it's well diversified and so on and so forth. But the piece that I work on is. Like with Unbounded Capital, we invest strictly in BSV-focused companies.
Great. So let's talk about that. So Zach, that's unusual. Most blockchain venture funds look for investment opportunities that are more blockchain agnostic, right? Why have you and your partners decided to focus your fund just on supporting and investing in BSV Ventures?
Well, our firm does not have a mandate to just focus on BSV Ventures,
okay.
To be clear. When our firm started, we invested in a variety of different blockchains and multiple companies that built on, I believe, 4 different blockchains, maybe 5, before we started focusing on kind of BSV and scalable blockchains. We're just at a point today where there's really just one blockchain that's serious about scale and that has capabilities so much greater than others. So from our perspective, we want to just focus on that ecosystem because we feel there's no lack of opportunity there, and because of our conviction in having in a blockchain that scales, really transforming the world and kind of winning out against other blockchains, we think that investing in companies that don't use a blockchain that has a good chance of that is not going to work in their favor. There's still going to be a ton of great companies that build on other blockchains and then eventually switch or don't use a blockchain anymore that become great companies, but we're not focused on them.
So Paul, I know, because I talked to you a lot as well as Zach about a lot of the companies that are out there growing the BSV space. What have been your impressions this year of the BSV venture ecosystem and how it's developed, and any particular companies and trends you like as you're seeing them?
I think it's been a particularly spectacular year, given, as folks on Wall Street would say, a lot of things are now hitting the tape, which is nice to see.
Finally.
Yeah, exactly. And it's great to be a pre-revenue company. There's a lot of pre-revenue companies that go public on all kinds of stock markets, and BSV may have been kind of perceived that way by some people because a lot of things were in development and about to come. Pardon me. But it's really exciting to now see what Crypto Fights is up to, which of course is a game by the company Fix Gaming, where we are investors in Fix Gaming. It's very exciting to me to see what they're doing, and I think we all need to remember this company is still in beta. That's really interesting when you stop and think. There's a company in beta that left Ethereum and that now typically, some days more so than others, does more transactions alone, one app on BSV, than the entirety of Ethereum, which I think is astounding, and they're still in beta. They're still working out the kinks, building up their bigger platform, Fix Gaming, which is, I sort of think of as like a Twitch in the making. So Crypto Fights was meant to be like their sort of proof of concept. Here's what you could do on the BSV blockchain, but what it's becoming instead is exciting. There's also a lot of what I would call growth stage, enterprise software, enterprise type businesses that are already on BSV that maybe make less noise, but they're there. They're putting transactions on chain. They're good sized companies that, again, left Ethereum, left Hyperledger. They're live already. They're working with nChain. I'm thinking in particular of a company that has a funny name that we all have to always say company with a K because that's their name. It's company but it starts with a K.
In Austria.
That's right. They're a reg tech company, regulatory technology software company, one of the leaders in their space. They left Ethereum and Hyperledger a year or so ago, came to BSV. They're a good-sized company. They're private. They're growing very, very well. We're actually not an investor in that company, but we know them and really like what they're doing. And as investors, we look for those kinds of companies. We, in particular, like to see growth stage, larger enterprises that are either new to blockchain or are looking around, leaving other blockchains. So it's been quite a year.
Right. That's a KYB, Know Your Business solutions provider, where let's say you're a bank, be one of their customers, and you have to pull KYB information on a potential client, right, that wants to open a bank account to fulfill regulatory obligations. And they're using the blockchain now to hash, just like the data integrity platforms, proof that they pulled KYB information on a particular potential client so that they can satisfy regulatory requirements later. And in the future, actually may want to tokenize the KYB information and create a trading marketplace on it. So they are now live on the BSV blockchain after speaking at CoinGeek Zurich. Zach, what are your impressions of the development so far this year in the ventures?
It's been great. We've seen a lot of our portfolio companies, I'd say, go from that, decidedly pre-product market fit stage to, getting product market fit or getting close to it. We focus on trying to be, the first or one of the first checks in the companies that we invest in. And it's been tremendous to kind of track a lot of progress. We have, I think, of our 9 portfolio companies, 4 are gearing up for like a Series A or, much bigger next round, lots of traction. And then, there's no shortage of, deals that we are seeing. We just committed to one last week and should be announcing that one soon. But overall, it's been very exciting and no shortage of deals to look at and to potentially invest in.
So as someone who's been in the BSV space since the very beginning, it's been interesting for me to watch the proliferation of the types of companies and the diversity of business sectors that are seeing applications built on BSV. So Paul, of the kind of sectors we're seeing, are there particular industry verticals, segments that you like particularly for use of BSV? We know it can do a lot of things for a lot of industries, but what do you think is particularly appealing?
Well, for us, I have sort of 2 answers for that. The first wishy-washy general answer is, we'll look at anything that has a good use case to be on BSV, needs to be on BSV. So it could be gaming, it could be software, it could be a social media company, it could be a marketplace. So That's the wishy-washy answer. But the other answer is due to the ability to monetize data uniquely on BSV that we believe you really can't do anywhere else. We're very focused on uses of data integrity, data authenticity, those kinds of things that you keep hearing today over and over again. But one of the things that's exciting about that is, we all would love to see, when's General Motors going to come to BSV? When's, I don't know, McDonald's going to announce they're coming to BSV? Well, when you work with these kinds of companies, Jimmy alluded to before today that one of the companies here has a major, I don't know if I'd call it a Fortune 500 company, probably bigger than that, as one of their clients. And what I love about that is, there you go. There are giant companies, possibly McDonald's, already on BSV. They don't need to announce we're going to BSV. They can just work with a company that can help them put something on chain that makes sense to have on chain. And so, in a sense, we already have, I know of several large, very, very large names that you would all know that are already on chain. They just haven't announced it yet because either they don't want to or they don't care. They're just using the blockchain, full stop.
Yeah, a lot of them don't really care about the chain. They just want a chain that works. What about you, Zach? What are trends you're seeing in industry sectors?
We and probably some people in the audience care. So if you're able to share, we'd love
it. We will. It will. The truth will come out in time. Don't worry.
Is there another event in a month when that might come
maybe,
out? Perhaps.
Maybe. Yeah,
I doubt it.
So one of the things I noticed that, Paul, you and I talk about this a lot of the companies you've heard from today started with like consumer-facing products, but they've also built B2B applications and infrastructure, right? Mm-hmm. So I almost call it blockchain as a service is emerging, where we had software as a service, platform as a service, where, for example, EHR Data could take their platform and actually provide it to other companies to record and track all kinds of personal information, whether it be healthcare or something else. What appeals to you at all about that kind of business play?
So at Unbounded, most of the companies in our portfolio fall into the category of making it easier to access the incredible technology of blockchain or Bitcoin without having to understand it. So an example, Run, which is one of, I believe, 6 or 7 tokenization protocols within BSV, by far the most widely used one today. Crypto Fights, the game that Paul mentioned, utilizes this. And Crypto Fights is the game that everyone is using, but this is a company that allows that game to exist in the form that it does today. And those are the type of investments we like to make, where it helps other entrepreneurs be able to access this technology without having to go through and be incredibly technical, the same way that all of us are using the TCP/IP protocol probably as we speak, and probably very few of us in this room. Well, I mean, this is a special room, but still probably a minority of us understand what that protocol means, or the other internet protocols that we use every day.
Paul, you want to address that at all?
Actually, what I wanted to mention is related, but not the same question. We were hoping to be able to talk about something else today. One of the other big things that's been happening this year that no one has seen officially yet, except a few of you in this room, is that there are new investors in the BSV space.
Yes.
Several of them have closed investments, and they're not BSV-focused funds like ourselves or Unbounded. They're just family offices, or they're just VCs. Like you heard earlier, Tim Draper's VC invested in Anna, and I can tell you it's not because Tim Draper's a BSV fan, because he may not be. It's quite possible he's not. But there are lots. He's not. That's a joke.
I can tell you about that later. That's a whole conversation.
There's a video.
There's a video. But one company we invested in last week, I thought the press release would have been out this week. We weren't trying to time it per se for this event, but how handy would it have been that I could talk to you today about, one of the top, not someone in this room who's looking at me, but another company we invested in that has one of the top U.S. angels backing them from a prior round, and lots of other VCs in their financing. And it's another data point about what's happening in BSV, and those kinds of investors, unlike the Andreessen Horowitzes of the world and others that are just spinning out the next DeFi token that, of course, has to have its own token, its own cryptocurrency, otherwise it can't work. It's nice to have these other VCs and family offices that are just looking for good investments that can grow their unfair advantage on Bitcoin SV. So unfortunately, we can't talk about them yet, but I know 2 or 3 companies that you've seen today that fall into that category.
Yeah, and after, I've been making a lot of trips with a lot of the BSV contingent to Dubai and the Middle East over the last year, and we've got some great, interesting investment opportunities that have triggered for some of our companies because of that, including one of the largest property real estate companies in that region investing in Tall, actually. So that I can say because that, it is a public company. So when do you think some of these larger venture capital funds like A16Z, right, which gets a lot of attention in Silicon Valley, the Andreessen Horowitz, blockchain-focused venture, when do you think they'll wake up to this BSV ecosystem?
Well, I've definitely seen the tide really change over the last year and especially the last 6 months. Jimmy, you were at this dinner last night, and there are, venture capitalists with their own funds there. There were many family offices that are LPs to firms like Andreessen Horowitz and other the kind of crypto consensus funds. And definitely not a majority of partners at these funds are, say, actively looking at BSV projects regularly. But I'm personally in communication, say, with probably between a quarter and a third of like the reputable, crypto or blockchain-focused VCs, and talking about some of the deals that we've already done or are considering. And that to me might have felt like a pipe dream like a year and a half ago. So there's been some very serious progress in terms of interest. I know for us, we've kind of, while we're still very focused on the BSV ecosystem, we use the language more so now of just focusing on what works rather than talking about why it works. So, and that's been really helpful, I think, to making that progress. And like you said, I think some of these major VC firms already have some exposure. I know, Alpha Brain, they have exposure. There's, a lot of top tier VC firms that already do in some capacity. So now it's just a matter of, when are they leading around and writing here's why we invested and why we really like this type of piece. I'm also in personal communication with some people that they've personally bought BSV. This is the managing partner of one of the biggest venture capital firms in crypto. He's personally bought BSV after our initial conversations, but said because of the politics with his portfolio companies and his LPs, he couldn't, kind of invest in us or invest in, a BSV company directly right now. But he's actively tracking what we're doing, and I'm confident we'll be, a relatively early adopter. It's just not necessarily today.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. We haven't talked about it all day, but there are a lot of politics around BSV in particular. Obviously, the entire digital asset crypto world is very tribal. And for those of you who follow BSV, we get the overwhelming brunt of negativity from the Bitcoin and crypto world, mostly because of people's dislike for Craig Wright, who is a very visible force, but certainly not the only, and by far, just one of many, many people working in this world. How do you think, Paul, we don't typically talk about the price of the asset, the coin itself, BSV, which is obviously a lot lower than BTC and even BCH these days. What do you think about the price and how that's affected by all of the atmospherics and politics around BSV?
Having come from the investment banking
and what do you
world,
think investors should think about it? Right.
Having come from the investment banking world where the kinds of antics, there's antics with public companies and so on as well, of course. But, I did a little analysis the other day as I'm prepping for my presentation in a month, and I track all the public cryptocurrencies and this and that. And I was curious, I hadn't thought of it this way before, but I thought, how many public companies are there in North America? Just North America, because the world is the world. But, NASDAQ, New York Stock Exchange, Toronto Stock Exchange, those are the 4 big exchanges in North America. For those who don't know, the Toronto Stock Exchange is the 3rd biggest in the world. So there's a lot of public companies there. There's about 9,500 public companies on those 4 exchanges. And as of this morning, there's almost 12,000 cryptocurrencies that are public. And most of those, they didn't all do ICOs. I don't know exactly how many of them raised capital, but they didn't raise capital. But they raised capital through ICOs or IDOs or IEOs. They're sort of working their way through the alphabet now. Maybe IFOs will be next. What would that be? An initial financial exchange or something? I don't know. Offering, whatever. So it's just, I don't think we're going to see an end, in my opinion, to the misinformation, all that kind of stuff anytime soon. It's just as a case in point, and I'll turn it over to you. I was having lunch with Chris Naprawa today from Tal, and we were, I don't want to throw her under the bus. I don't think she's here. I'm sorry if this offends anyone, especially the guy I'm sitting next to, but we were sitting with a CoinDesk reporter. And if you don't know, really quickly, CoinDesk is owned by Digital Currency Group, or big investor in Digital Currency Group, which is one of the biggest backers of a lot of companies in this space, very much the enemy, and view BSV as the enemy, and CoinDesk, sort of masquerades as, oh, we're like the Bloomberg of crypto, but no, I really don't think so. The misinformation is astounding. But here's the point. We're having lunch with her, and she'd sat in on the morning presentations. And so she said to Chris, who, Tal minds a lot of the transactions that we had talked about. So she asked about NFTs and this and that. She said, how can you guys do those kinds of transactions on BSV without smart contracts? And we said, what do you mean? She goes, well, Bitcoin doesn't have smart contracts. And I went, I didn't actually. I didn't.
You wanted
to be rude, but I'm like, really? Mm-hmm. So CoinDesk would have, the world of crypto believe there are no smart contract capabilities on BSV, Bitcoin Cash, whatever, only on, the things they're involved with. So I feel like the misinformation machine is going to keep going. And I think the reason it's going to keep going is Andreessen Horowitz just raised $400 million for another seed fund that I don't think is all crypto, but probably some of it's crypto. And I think, they're the kinds of groups that I believe perpetuate this idea of, well, we need more cryptocurrencies, because if you want to do a new, collateralized loan thing that we're going to call the ketchup that goes on the burger, for sure you have to raise $100 million for another ICO, otherwise it won't work. That whole kind of thing I think is just going to keep going till the fund's over, which is something we see in the public equities markets too. You'll see a trend where, cannabis is hot, so there'll be 1 million cannabis deals until cannabis is not hot anymore. And, biotech is in for a while, so there's 1 million biotech IPOs until that gets reeled back a little bit. But I feel like this one is just going on and on and on because the regulators aren't, in my opinion, aren't really there. They sort of have like I don't know, whatever the gun is called on a tank, really slowly picking their spot. Okay, you out of the 12,000, I'm going to pick on you, today. And probably behind the scenes they're doing more than that, but it doesn't look like it. So you sort of feel like, speed limit says 55. If I do an ICO, it's kind of like going 58. Who's going to pull me over for going 58? Nobody. So I'll just do another ICO.
All right,
Sorry.
Zach, quickly, what do you think about the BSV price and relative to what its real utility is? And what do you tell your investors?
So I think it's good to ground in the price for the entire crypto market, which is just completely and utterly divorced from any type of utility.
Right.
So when you look at the bull case for something like BTC, it's that we will hold it, it will go up because other people will find it valuable, and eventually so many people will find it valuable that will pay millions of dollars or more in transaction fees to be able to settle central bank or giant banking transactions. That's like, I think, the charitable bull thesis for how BTC gets to $5 million or something. That's not a thesis based on people using it for anything reasonable. That's a thesis based on people holding it and selling to someone else for a higher price. And that fundamental, greater fool theory is what applies to pretty much all of these glorified Ponzi schemes. So people are not really trying to, I think, they maybe combine creating something of value with like a Ponzi to make money, but most of these crypto assets don't really serve a purpose that is connected to some type of value creation. So when I think we look at the price of BSV, it's also, I'd say, relatively disconnected from, the value and the utility of the network. Sure. When you look at kind of fundamental events for BSV and price action, you see very little to no correlation. The main things that have driven the BSV price action has been speculation around the question of, is Craig Wright Satoshi? Because, and there's some people in this room that have a lot of have looked into this more than myself around market manipulation and what's happening in the crypto markets, and how because so much of the float for BSV, the asset, is on these like crypto exchanges that have strong structural biases against BSV, like how accurate even is the price at any given time. But I would say the price of pretty much any crypto asset is more of a reflection of how much do people want to gamble on crypto, and not much more than that. But I do think that over a long time horizon, BSV, the asset, is really will function as a commodity that will go up and down depending on the demand for using the network for transactions and data. So that's kind of the long-term case for it. But in the near term, though, I do think that with more eyes on the BSV ecosystem growing today, BSV every day does about more transactions than Ethereum. Once it's at 50, 100x, 1,000x, I do think
it's hard to ignore.
Yeah, it's hard to ignore. More eyes will be on it. And
Right
we'll-
now, I think you would both agree you think it's undervalued significantly.
Stupidly.
I mean, I would say that if it's purely based on like the fundamentals of the ledger itself now, I wouldn't necessarily agree with that. But I would say that there's a very serious amount of catalyst for upside as a result of more eyes coming onto the network.
Well, to wrap up this session, what I would say, we don't typically talk about price at BSV events, mostly because I find all cryptocurrency prices really difficult to explain, right? There's no rhyme or reason. I get asked all around the world what explains the BTC price or Ethereum or even BSV, and the short answer is nothing really explains it. And we are trying the BSV ecosystem, as you've heard throughout the day, to provide an answer. And that answer is driven by the utility of the chain for data at high velocity, high volume for many useful things, from payments to all of the things you heard about today, that over time, then the token itself that drives the network has value from the velocity of data that is driven through the network, whatever that value is, it is. So we're trying to provide an answer to that. We'll see if we succeed. We have confidence we will. We know we have a lot of hurdles ahead of us and a lot of bright young minds joining us along the way more. And we believe long-term that will provide a viable answer. That's our thesis. It's why we believe in scaling. What happens in the future is up to us and so many other people out there in the world. So let's thank Zach and Paul so I can wrap up.